All right, why don't we get started? So welcome everyone. I'm Bill Morrow, one of the managing partners here at ECS. Thanks for joining us today for what is sure to be an excellent discussion. As we're all transitioning through the COVID world, it's become clear that most critical component to successfully getting back to business is your people. We've always known people are the cornerstone to the success in any company, and they'll be even more important as you progress through this pandemic. Clearly, you feel your people are important to you as well, as it's easily the most talked about topic we've had over the last few weeks, even more questions than PPP. So to that end, we've developed this webinar to answer the most common questions and provide you with key points that you should consider going forward. Our agenda today will consist of a 30-minute discussion where we'll be looking at the current HR landscape and how that will affect your go forward. We will then cover off any questions you may have in a 15-minute Q&A session. Feel free to click on the Q&A button down at the bottom, and you will be able to submit questions at any time. We'll also be clicking up a poll right now, and if you'd like, you can answer those questions, and we will be reviewing the answers of your poll at the end of the before the Q&A session. A few programming notes: we'll be recording the webinar and sending out an email link to the video. Along with the recording, you'll receive the slides from the presentation, and included in the packet today will be information referenced throughout the webinar. For those of you not familiar with ECS, we are a comprehensive business transformation company focused on helping clients achieve and exceed their goals. Our team of business leaders have the experience and know-how to build a great strategy while helping you execute to success. We do this across all functional areas in a company, from finance, operations, sales, marketing, recruiting, and of course, HR. We provide our services in three different ways. One, we will come in and do a fresh eyes assessment, providing companies a comprehensive outside view of their business and a clear roadmap forward. Two, working alongside you in fractional support roles to give you that additional horsepower you need to get to the next level. And three, filling crucial C-level roles like CEO, CFO, COO, and more, giving you C-level executives that you might be missing either temporarily or fractionally. Leading our discussion today is Jason Fisher, managing partner at ECS, where he co-leads both the operations and HR teams. Jason has supported our clients by providing expertise in operational excellence, handling change management, and developing high-functioning business processes. He's worked with ECS clients in over 20 different industries, providing executive leadership and helping navigate change. Joining Jason today is Karen Boots, partner at ECS, where she works with companies to help provide capital direction, human capital direction, and support. Karen has provided guidance to companies in over 15 industries and various number of areas, including organizational development, leadership training, employee relations, and more. Along with Karen and Jason is Laura Schlesinger, director at ECS. She has worked with startups to entrepreneur-sized companies and everything in between. Laura's experience lays in building human capital strategies and guiding clients through execution in ever-changing environments. Her skill sets include talent acquisition, employee engagement, employee branding, and more. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jason.
All right, thank you, Bill. Good morning, everyone, and hope that you're all staying safe during these crazy times. I feel like I say that a lot these days. As we navigate through COVID-19, we're at a point in time where we start to focus on how we come back from a human capital perspective. I thought this cartoon was a perfect segue into this topic, right? I think we're in good enough shape to start making the same mistakes again. So keeping in line with ECS's perspective, we cannot view anything going forward as it was before the pandemic started. The landscape, rules, processes are all changing and fluid. We need to be able to have a mindset of what will be as best we can, not what was. So in this webinar, you should leave with how I get my mind wrapped around the new HR landscape, what I should be doing both with my working and furloughed, and in some cases it's not furloughed, they're laid off team members, what proactive steps I should start taking in order to be prepared to ramp up in the next few weeks and months. And we say months because this is not an overnight thing or 0 to 60, right? A lot of teams will come back in stages. How and when should I bring team members back? What pitfalls I need to be aware of both now and in the future? And then how do I keep up with this ever-changing landscape of Fed and state regulations, requirements, and laws? All right, so these are uncharted waters for all of us. So we want to have a perspective that focuses on three key mindsets that we want to keep in front and center as we think about our teams. The first is coordination. We cannot make decisions in silos by function or area of support. And by area of support, I mean legal, insurance, accounting. More than ever, it's all massively interdependent. The second is agility. There's no absolute right or wrong, and the overall situation is fluid on an unprecedented level. You must have the mindset that agility and pivoting will be needed as the landscapes change, settle, revisit previous scenarios, and in some cases change again. So this is not a situation in which you get back in some modified way, and that's how it will be. And then the third is reallocation, and this may go a little bit further beyond human capital, but as we work through bringing our teams back and we move through the crisis, in most cases, as business leaders, we'll be faced with scenarios in which we need to reallocate human capital, finances, customers, processes, and resources to meet these evolving environments. It's kind of what's changed in our HR landscape. So before we discuss what's changed, let's start with pre-pandemic. The business environment from a human capital perspective was pretty set. Unemployment at lows, rules and regs relatively well understood, insurance, workers' comp, think about it as the status quo. Then comes the pandemic, and the Fed and state get involved, and we have action through executive order, businesses deemed essential and non-essential, closures in effect, government programs like FFCRA, so the CARES Act, all enacted in the largest scale in history, and banks, state, and Fed agencies completely overwhelmed. New employment laws, some are a mix of temporary, some are injunctive, and some are potentially permanent, and unemployment at its highest level, over 30 million people. Then comes the regulatory bodies and industry associations. So you have CDC, Americans with Disabilities Act, Occupational Safety and Hazard, better known as OSHA, SHRM, Society for Human Resources. And then you've got legal industry, insurance industry, and your specific business industry associations all putting out information. One key aspect here is they are all working in what I would call semi-silos, and at times the direction between the larger group is contradictory, and or the industries are fighting to make changes with the Fed and state or whoever is giving that executive order. So this is not cohesive, will leave us with certain levels of interpretation, which could be really troubling as business owners. So our new landscape is more complicated on a go-forward basis during the pandemic and into what will be the post-pandemic. And with that, I'll turn this over to Laura.
Thanks, Jason. You may be thinking, what should I be doing with my teams? First thing you should be doing with your teams is communicating. Most importantly, lead with empathy when communicating with your teams. Realize they may have kids at home, be experiencing technology challenges, or just feel anxious during this unprecedented time. Next, determine a regular cadence for meetings. We recommend 3 types of meetings. 1, a business meeting, 2, one-on-ones, and 3, fun team building meetings. First is the business meeting, where you'll discuss business. Second, one-on-ones, less business and more of a personal feel. Things you want to ask your employees are you healthy? Do you have what you need to succeed? Do you understand expectations? And what obstacles can I help remove? Third is a fun team building type meeting. That would be virtual happy hours, a meet our pets or kids, maybe wear your favorite hat, incorporate a 15-minute stretch or exercise activity a couple times a week. It's worth noting new hires may need more frequent check-ins simply because they're new, and remote work does not allow them to ask their coworker sitting right next to them a question. Some other ways to communicate, connect, and build a sense of community with employees would be to schedule a town hall meeting to provide company updates, create a newsletter with the goal to build camaraderie among your team members, include recipes, since we've all discovered cooking since the quarantine, fitness tips, highlight individual accomplishments, and employees volunteering in their communities. Last, conduct a brief post-engagement survey with one question. How likely are you to recommend your employer to a friend as a place to work? The next thing you should be doing with your teams is setting and managing expectations. Setting clear expectations for remote teams is essential. Specifically outline the work that needs to be done. Prioritize the work and due date if applicable. Realize processes and resources may have shifted when transitioning to a remote workforce, so previous timeframes may or may not need to be altered. Manage workers through accountability and results, not through micromanaging. Be flexible when business warrants for when work gets done, since many are juggling daycare, schooling, and other responsibilities. The silver lining here is that recent data shows current productivity among remote workers surpasses previous productivity levels. And the reason is because of the flexibility. The final thing you should be thinking about when it comes to your team is technology. New processes and technology are great as long as everyone knows how to use it and it's working. If new technology was implemented for remote work, assume your teams do not know how to use it and provide training. Be patient, provide tech support when needed. And lastly, Zoom fatigue is a real thing. Ask yourself, is a video call necessary for this call? Employees may be concerned about others seeing their homes, their kids, or dogs walking in. Be sensitive to these concerns. If you're communicating, setting expectations, and helping with technology, you're well on the way to the last arrow on the slide, creating a sense of community and a positive culture. And now I'll toss to Karen.
Thank you, Laura, and good morning, everyone. So while you are focusing on what to do with your employees in the current state, you also need to be taking proactive steps to plan how you will reopen or ramp up your business. First, you need to recognize the changing legal landscape. As Jason mentioned, there are several agencies and laws that all need to be coordinated at this time. Not all might apply to your business, but you must do your research to ensure you understand which ones do. This is not the time to make assumptions. For example, you might assume that you are not a covered employer under the Emergency FMLA Extension Act. The EFMLA provides 2/3 of an employee's normal pay for 10 weeks if they are unable to work because of taking care of a child who is home due to a COVID-19 school or daycare closure. So you may be thinking, well, that doesn't apply to me. I've never been a covered employer under FMLA. I don't have 50 employees who work within 75 miles of each other. However, under the EFMLA, any employer with less than 500 employees is covered by this act. Now, there are exceptions. So this is a perfect example of not making assumptions, doing your homework, and determining which law applies to your business. You want to ensure you are not inadvertently breaking any laws or implementing any new rules incorrectly. Second, frequent and consistent communication. Laura just gave some great suggestions of several different ways you can engage and communicate with your employees. But we cannot stress enough, even if you aren't able to do all of what she mentioned, you must hold regular business meetings. You don't need to have all the answers to communicate to your employees. Our experience is that staff are starved for information and appreciate frequent touch points, even if it's just to let them know you're researching and planning and will keep them updated. Now is not a time for silence, and you cannot over-communicate in this situation. Third, research and retain needed support. Don't try to go it alone. Make a list of your available resources and determine where you might have gaps. Reach out and obtain resources prior to opening. You don't want to be scrambling on top of trying to open up your business to find folks to answer any questions you may have. This could be some HR guidance, contacting a labor attorney, or working closely with your benefits broker. Fourth, now is a great time to do some workforce planning. So that includes a couple steps. First, you need to determine your employee status. You might want to consider the following buckets. Who has been working remotely? Can they continue, or do they need to be on site when you reopen? Who has been furloughed? Are they available to return, or have they obtained other employment? Who is able to return to work without scheduling restrictions, or who needs a different schedule based on childcare needs, or do they need a reduced schedule? Who can only continue to work remotely, and is that possible? Who cannot work at all? And we'll talk about that in a little more detail next. Second, you need to consider your customer and business needs. Are there changes that need to be made to safely serve your customers? Should you look to change the layout of your store or your office? Do you need to provide differing delivery methods, such as takeout or curbside pickup? Or is your business considered a high-risk area? And should you have customers sign consent forms to come on site? After you look at your employee status and your business needs, think about whether there are other methods that you can utilize to provide service. These might include flex arrangements. Do you have employees that can work maybe in the morning but not in the afternoon, and vice versa? And can you have them share duties? Can you continue to allow employees to work remotely? If so, make sure you're communicating those expectations. Do you need to institute rotating schedules? For some businesses, this is a safety issue. Maybe it's not safe to have your whole workforce back at the same time. So you might need to rotate employees through or have certain employees work on certain days. And now's a great time to think about cross-training. Take the time to look at your talent and see if you can reallocate resources or have employees switch job duties. Finally, determine the appropriate leader to own the ramp up and return to work process. Someone needs to be the go-to person for all things COVID-19. This could be an HR person, or if you don't have one, you need to dedicate someone that will be able to drive the process. So now you've worked your plan, how should you actually bring team members back? Of course, everyone is very anxious to get back to work and open the economy. However, you need to ensure compliance with federal and local stay-at-home orders. It's easy to jump the gun, so try to avoid that. Ensure you are first allowed to begin conducting business, even while utilizing social distancing methods. Utilize that workforce plan and employee availability to guide which order employees should return. Make sure you're applying that criteria consistently and document. Jason will talk more about that later. If you've qualified for the Paycheck Protection Program, known as the PPP, consider the timing and method of bringing back staff to ensure you are meeting all of the qualifications. After you've analyzed your employee buckets, you do need to determine how to handle employees who are unable or unwilling to return to work. Some employees may be just fearful to return to work. Maybe they have an underlying health condition or live with someone who does. You may have employees that still have family obligations that interfere with their ability to return to work. Or you still may have employees who are under quarantine due to exposure to COVID-19. How will you handle those specific and individual situations? Once you know which employees can return, you need to ensure that the workplace they return to is safe. So some things to consider are, will you perform employee health screenings upon entering the building? Have you done an initial deep cleaning? And what does your ongoing cleaning schedule look like? Do you have adequate PPE? That might be masks, gloves, sanitizer. Have you looked at your office layout? And might you need to change something, including how you interact with customers? Are you going to require more hand washing breaks? How about your break rooms? Will they be open? And if not, how will employees eat their meals and take their breaks? You may also want to look at essential and non-essential travel. There may be a change in definitions these days of what you consider essential business travel. Also, take a moment to look at your current compensation structure. You may have had to make some compensation adjustments while either shut down or on reduced schedules. Review that and decide how to move forward. Will you continue? And if so, for how long? Also, take a look at your workers' compensation insurance. If you continue to have employees that work remotely, make sure you understand the workers' comp laws that apply to those specific workers. All of these things will probably include or require policy and procedure changes. Could be your meal break procedure, travel, attendance. Make sure you pull out those handbooks and those policy and procedure manuals, review them, and make changes where necessary. Ensure you're having employees sign off on new employee handbook acknowledgement forms to ensure that they understand the new regulations and the potential consequences if they fail to abide by them. So, there's a lot of information we just shared there, and I'm sure you all have a ton of individual questions, which unfortunately we can't really answer in this type of format. So we thought it would be helpful to put together a few scenarios of some common situations that you may be facing. So our first one is about an employee named Mary, who was an accountant in your organization and was able to fairly reasonably, easily transition her on-site work to working remotely from home. However, after working full-time from home for 3 weeks, she falls ill and is awaiting results from her doctor to determine if she has tested positive for COVID-19. So what are your responsibilities as her employer? First and foremost, as Laura mentioned earlier, respond with empathy. You may have an employee who is seriously ill, and you need to show your empathy and compassion to that person. Under the Families First Corona Response Act, if an employee is either positive for COVID-19 or awaiting results, covered employers must provide up to 2 weeks of paid sick leave based on their higher regular rate of pay or the applicable state or federal minimum wage at 100% for experiencing COVID-19 symptoms. So in this scenario, Mary would be eligible for 2 weeks of federally mandated paid emergency sick leave. If she has some sick time or PTO on the books, she does not need to use that first. She can use the emergency paid sick leave prior to any accrued time. You will, however, need to ask Mary you will have to provide her with an emergency leave request form and ask her to submit written documentation from a healthcare provider. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Laura to walk you through our second scenario.
Thanks, Karen. Another scenario we would like to review is with Jack, an ops manager. Jack is an operations manager in your organization. He's come back to work and is meeting his schedule requirements. In the fall, schools in Jack's district decide to only use half days. Jack has 2 young children and his spouse also works in a non-remote setting. Jack approaches you and lets you know that he must work a modified schedule. How do you proceed? The first step is to respond with empathy. This is not within Jack's control and is COVID-19 driven. Discuss with Jack the specifics of his requested schedule change and determine if any of his current job duties can be done remotely and if there are any accommodations that can be made. If not, and his hours still need to be reduced, research whether he would be eligible for any benefits under the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, also known as FFCRA, which covers emergency paid leaves and includes federal emergency paid sick leave and federal emergency expanded family and medical leave. You will also want to see if Jack is eligible for unemployment insurance or earned sick leave if applicable in your state. The key is to work with Jack and discuss all available options to him, as well as what is needed for the business. Don't be afraid to reach out for guidance. Next, we'll take a look at some pitfalls to be aware of both now and in the future. Trying to do it all on your own. We're all in this together. We've all heard newscasters, public officials, various organizations, and even celebrities say, we're all in this together. Now is the time to lean on your resources such as legal, state federal guidelines, member organizations, peers, consultants, and webinars, assuming business will return to normal. We need to get our heads wrapped around the thought that this is not temporary. There will be a new normal that will evolve as businesses resume. You need to plan for continued changes to the way you do business in the short and long term. Failing to plan for potential future closures. Once the stay-at-home orders are lifted and businesses open back up, there may be times when there's an uptick in the virus and businesses will need to shut down again. Now is a time to think about, what are the key learnings from the past couple months? Take the time now to note what worked and what you would do differently next time. Having a plan in place to cross-train employees may ease business disruptions if absences spike due to a resurgence of COVID-19. Lack of communication and failing to display empathy to employees. Employees are going to have a lot of questions and concerns about how work is conducted in the short and long term. It's easy to fall back into planning and acting without communicating to employees. The more you communicate to them what's going on, the more they will understand the situation and feel good about the steps your organization is taking. When communicating, it is essential to display empathy and not assume you know what's going on with employees until you've had a discussion with them. Paralysis and fear of making mistakes. This is a very confusing and unprecedented time for everyone. Face it, mistakes will be made. To set yourself up for success, utilize the resources you have and document your decisions. You will be provided a list of a few good resources to all attendees after today's webinar. Not rethinking your recruitment and talent strategies. This crisis has pushed all companies to examine how work gets done from people to processes. Now is a good time to ask, what work are we doing and who can do it? It's time to rethink the org chart and find the employees with the capabilities to deliver solutions. This may mean eliminating silos and deploying talent to business critical areas. If you keep these ideas in mind, you will experience less pitfalls now and in the future. Now I'll toss to Jason.
All right, thanks, Laura. To how will I keep up with an ever-changing landscape of federal and state regulations? Complicated, yes. Frustrating, most likely. Impossible, no. So the first thing is knowledge is power, right? You want to ensure your knowledge of the landscape is specific to your business. To do this, it'll be key to have experts in supporting or advisory functions that are keeping up with the information and changes to work with. Each law, regulation, or program has the potential to affect multiple areas in your organization. We talk about those support functions. At this point, really critical: legal, HR, insurance, and accounting. The second is be accountable. Critical to success and navigation of the changing landscape will be accountability. Determine whom in your company is the point person and ensure that the entire organization is aware of this. This ties into the communication and expectation setting we discussed earlier. And you want this person is really focused on, they're the resource that's tasked to lead the monitoring, documenting, and projects related to your return. The last is document, document, document. And we can't say enough here about documentation. And there are a multitude of reasons why, but we're going to call out two of the most critical ones. So first, future planning and crisis management. Think about your business continuity. Knowing what worked, what did not work, drivers and information that led to decisions at a point in time will all help lessen the burden and response times if anything like this happens again. The second reason is one of risk mitigation. No one can predict the future, but we already see discussions around class action suits, potential for EEOC, workman's comp, liability issues, compensation issues, payback or forgiveness of loans, and of course, there's the unknown. So documenting all of your changes and actions is of the utmost importance. It's going to protect you in the future, and it's going to mitigate your risk if something goes wrong. So that kind of brings us to the conclusion of this part of the webinar, and I'll turn it back over to Bill, who's going to go through the polling results and open up the Q&A to everybody. So thanks very much. Bill?
Thanks, Karen, Laura, Jason, for a great review of the ever-changing landscape of human capital today. That was a tremendous amount of material you covered, and it was well done. As a reminder, we'll be sending out the video, the slides, and the additional information to you later. If you'd like to contact any one of the team, we'll be sharing with you their contact information on the last slide. Now let's take a look at our polling results. Looks like we're split quite a bit here on when we think business is going to ramp back up. 30% of you are essential. Businesses never close. Very cool. And it looks like most everyone, the heavy majority, are looking at end of June for a ramp back up. What's your comfort level in handling the ramp up? Somewhat confident. It looks like most of you are pretty confident on your ability to do that, 50%. That's a great number. So good to see. Good to see everyone, again, is feeling pretty good and is doing well. Let's jump over to the Q&A. And again, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Feel free to ask questions on the Q&A, and we will run through them one at a time. So question one is, how is my workers' comp insurance affected if part of my team remains virtual? Jason, you want to take that one?
Sure, thanks, Bill. So a couple things here. So obviously, if a team member is working remotely and they're on your behalf, they are covered under workman's comp. What you need to do is, this is where having your insurance broker as part of your support team is critical, right? So there's a multitude of facets that get affected by this. So one is your workman's comp. If your staff mix is changing from work on site to work at home, that's going to impact your workman's comp rates. You need to make sure you're providing the right safety and PPE. That'll affect workman's comp rates. And if you, let's say a quarter of your staff goes to virtual and can stay virtual after the pandemic, you actually may have some benefit in your general liability and other coverages because your risk ratings will change with the number of people on site, et cetera. So again, it's going to be specific to your situation, but you really need to work with your insurance broker to understand the changes and what you're doing so that they can rewrite or underwrite your insurance policies.
Thanks, Jason. Next question. What do I do if an employee doesn't want to come back as they're making more money on unemployment than they would working? Karen, is that one you'd like to take?
I would love to take that one. So that is a very real situation that is happening across the country right now. So great question. A couple of things to start off. I think we want to be very careful about guiding our employees in their personal decisions. So what we want to do is provide the facts to them. First, we want to understand, and again, being sure that we're empathetic. Just make sure that the employee is not coming back because they don't fall into one of those protected buckets. You know, they're quarantining still, they're providing childcare, so they're covered under the EFMLA. Make sure that they're not covered under some of these other laws and acts. If they're fit as a fiddle and there's no reason they can't come back and you need them in your organization, so you have a job, they're able to work, and they're saying they don't want to come back, then the fact is that they are resigning their position. So you can explain to them that we have a job, you don't want to come back, I'm assuming you're resigning, and when the unemployment papers come in, I will, instead of now checking off lack of work, I will check off resigning. And then they need to make that decision to what they want to do at that point. That's not something that you should really be providing guidance on. Just give them the facts and then let it go from there.
Okay. Thank you, Karen. This question's quite similar, but I want to ask it anyhow because it's a little bit different. If your organization is essential and fully operational, but employees scared to return due to underlying conditions, what should you do? FMLA suggests resignation. Karen, again, or Laura, do you want to add something to that one?
Sure, I can try to take that one again. That is a different situation and a little bit of a nuanced one. I would say this situation falls into one of the grayer areas amongst the laws. The EFMLA remains quiet on that topic. So this is a situation where you, again, are going to have to make sure you understand the entire employee situation, look at your individual organization's leave policies. There may be a policy that they can fall under that might protect their job or give them some time off. I would not suggest resignation or really suggest anything to them at this time. You should really just make sure they understand what is open to them and what they're eligible for, and then let them make that decision.
Okay. Next question. If an employee's hours are reduced from 40 to 30, they can receive unemployment of 25% of their full rate. Is the federal PUA of $600 prorated or paid in full? Jason, was that one you would like to take, or?
That's a good question. I'm not 100% sure on that, so we'd have to look that up and get back to the person that asked that. I think, you know, if people work partial hours, their baseline unemployment will be reduced by the hours they work. But the PUA, I'm not 100% sure how that's working. So we'll have to follow up with that.
Got it.
Sorry.
What if an employee doesn't want to come back to work because of concerns about the safety of sending his child to daycare, even though the daycare is open? Laura, any comments there? Oh, Laura, you there?
I'm here.
There you go.
I think similar to what Karen has expressed, it's a situation where you really want to understand the laws in that case, state and federal laws, see what that employee could be eligible for, and then make decisions from there.
Okay.
Karen, do you want to add to that?
No, I think that's, again, that's one of those gray areas that's really going to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. I think, as we've been saying all along, you want to provide empathy. So if you are able to figure out what sort of leave policy your organization offers that employee might fall into, I think it behooves you to try to do that. It behooves you to try to work with the employee.
Last question here. If we received PPP money and our staff is reduced, can I give a mid-year bonus to my employees currently working to use the grant money? Jason, do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, so I'd say the PPP is still really great because all the final rules aren't out. And in addition, as I understand it, there's some changes sitting in hand of Congress as they come back that may be approved. So what I would say to that is, as long as you're meeting the threshold of 75% of the money is being used for payroll, and that you have a consistent and fair methodology to how you would be distributing bonuses. Obviously, if you just dump $20,000 into somebody's account and not give anybody else a bonus, probably crossing some lines there. So you have to think about consistency and fairness. You have to think about the time frame in which it's being used. And then also keep in mind that the number of full-time equivalents you have on versus part-time is how you're going to get back to getting the max forgiveness. So I'd verify that you can do that. But certainly as it's part of payroll, if that's normal process, I would go ahead and do that.
One more question came in. It's similar to the last one. If we have the PPP, what are some of the ways to use it to pay people beyond billable hours? People who cannot come back due to childcare, we would still consider them a portion, 75% of their pay. But what about people who can work a portion of their regular hours, but not all the hours? Should we just cover the rest of their salary in full or a percentage?
Hey, Bill, I'll take this, and I think this goes in line with the other question. I think you have to think about the rules around PPP. So again, it's 75% of your loan goes towards payroll. We think the 8 weeks will be changed a little bit, not say 8 weeks from date of receiving, but what's on the table, and it's not passed yet, is 8 weeks from full ramp up. So it gives a little more time to use those funds. Whatever you do, the banks and the government is going to look at, as we understand it, is going to look at the number of full-time equivalents. So if you had 2 part-time people, they equate to 1 full-time person from the period of Feb 2020 to March. And that's going to set your baseline. So as long as you're using the dollars, you can break it out different ways. If you want to get everybody slightly back or just pay the difference, you don't necessarily have to pay the full salaries. It's going to be total dollars used as a percent of your loan. and what an FTE equivalent comes up to. So if you had 10 full-timers and 2 part-timers, that's 11 FTE equivalents. So you have to do a little bit of, we go back to Karen's answer, but a little bit of workforce planning and do some math to kind of figure out how much you want to cover of each person's reduced hours.
Thanks. Well, thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. As always, we're ready to support you and your company however we can. Whether that's just a quick question or a more in-depth issue and need, we want to be able to see you succeed. Feel free to reach out to anyone of the team listed on the screen. We wish you all the best in the transition to your new time in your business. Thank you.